Welcome to Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon. This is episode 9, Therapy to Navigate Sexual Assault, Depression, and ADHD. Before we get started, I want to thank you listeners. We have reached our first milestone. We have now surpassed 1,000 plays of Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon. I am so happy. I am euphoric. I am so proud of our audience. And once again, thank you for listening and sharing it, and I really appreciate you guys. I got another great episode coming at you today. This is another one of my medical school classmates, Hannah, who unfortunately dealt with sexual assault. So we really get into a great conversation where she talks about what that experience was like, how really at the time she didn't even acknowledge that it actually was sexual assault, and it took about a year until she really knew that that is something that she had experienced. So she talks about using therapy and how therapy helped her kind of deal with this experience, as well as depression and ADHD. So this is a fantastic episode. I think you guys are really going to like it. Please let me know what you think. Warning, this episode contains graphic content that may not be suitable for all ages. Hannah, well, happy Cinco de Mayo. Let's cheers to that. It's a great day.
Yeah.
And also Mental Health Month. So I know when we release this, it's certainly not going to be May, but we're here, trying to at least contribute to mental health awareness. And I want to thank you so much for being here. Today we're going to be talking about, your experiences with sexual assault. You also mentioned how kind of ADD was a portion of your story. And I imagine like elements of PTSD, depression, anxiety are all kind of intertwined in there as well.
Yeah.
So you requested that we kind of start this podcast with essentially why you're here, and why I reached out to you is the article that you posted on the PNWU health blog. And so you're going to read it right now, but we'll also put a link to it in the show notes, and you guys can learn more about Hannah there. All right, let's kind of hear what you wrote.
So the article's called Coming Home, How a Sexual Assault Robbed Me of Me and How Therapy Saved Me. I don't think I came up with that title. I think that was
they put that in there?
Yeah, PNWU.
Well, either way, it was beautifully written, and so yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I am an advocate for therapy. Ask any of my friends or family, and they'll confirm that. When they come see me seeking advice or simply talking through their challenges, I often bring up how helpful and even life-changing talking to a therapist can be. Even with acquaintances, I find myself casually starting sentences with, "My therapist once told me." I'm not shy about advocating for therapy or even sharing the transformative impact it's had on me. Despite my willingness to share, however, most people are unaware of the events that led me to become such an advocate. The Me Too movement and the feeling of being supported in my personal and professional life has emboldened me to share my experience with sexual assault. It was 8 years ago. I was an 18-year-old full of energy and excitement for my next chapter in life. I'd graduated early from high school and moved 1,200 miles from my hometown in the Midwest to attend a university in Boston. It was an invigorating time. I was learning so much in my classes and meeting people from all around the country and world. Just over a month after moving into this new and exciting place, I was raped by a student on my dormitory floor. The assault left me physically hurt, emotionally devastated, ashamed, and confused. I had only known my friends and classmates for a short period of time, and I was physically far away from anyone I trusted or loved. I didn't tell a soul about the assault. The rest of the semester went by in a blur. While I did fine in classes, I failed at fostering my new friendships, didn't get into the singing or dancing extracurriculars I had auditioned for, and couldn't get any scholarships that would have made it possible for me to continue attending the school. Just 4 months after moving across the country, I moved back to my hometown, feeling defeated by my big dreams and still devastated, ashamed, and confused by the assault. I had had bouts with depression earlier in my teenage years, but now I fell into a depression unlike any I'd experienced before. That summer was filled with working 3 jobs, exercising to escape, and engaging in plenty of self-destructive behaviors. The assault played again and again in my head every time I tried to sleep. In the fall, I started up again at a university closer to home, the opposite of the person I had been 6 months prior. I slept through welcome week and failed to register for classes that excited me like those I took in Boston. My self-destructive behaviors continued. I got by in my classes, but was not the engaged student I had once been. Looking back, I was barely hanging on to fragments of myself and often displayed the worst of myself, not knowing how else to be. That spring, 1 year after the assault, was the first time that I told someone about it, my sister. She was working for a sexual assault awareness organization, and as odd as it seems to me now, this was the first time that I acknowledged that what happened to me was indeed assault. Still, due to real and perceived barriers, I didn't seek out counseling until a full year after this talk. Instead, I stumbled through 2 years of academic and personal hardship, struggling in ways that I had never before and haven't since. I had never felt further from myself. I remember thinking, if someone were to ask me what 3 words I would use to describe myself, I wouldn't be able to name even one. Finding a therapist was awkward. In my depression, the last thing I wanted to do was to go through the effort of finding the right person to crack myself open in front of. I was also a full-time student with a very busy schedule and little practical know-how to navigate the often complicated process of seeking professional help. But somehow I did it. Today, I am so thankful to my past self for taking that first step. After verifying that she was the right fit for me, I started seeing my therapist once a week. It took several sessions for me to lay out everything that was going on in my life. In my mind, the assault was just a small piece of my many failures, quote unquote, from the past few years. She helped me realize the significance of what happened to me, classifying the feelings I had most nights when I laid down to go to bed as post-traumatic stress disorder. With that diagnosis came the framework to work through the assault and move forward in my healing. Beyond the assault, she helped me work through the challenges I was having with my family and gave me exercises to deal with my frequent anxiety. After over a year of seeing her, she identified some interesting behaviors and referred me to a psychiatrist who aided in my understanding of my challenges and retooling of my life. It was an intense phase of healing and self-discovery, and a fulcrum around which I was able to point myself toward my medical school dreams. For any survivor of sexual assault who is struggling, you are not alone. Know that your complex emotions are valid, yet assault is not something you should be shameful of or deal with in silence. Please reach out for help. Visit raindoc.org or call the National Sexual Assault Hotline. I provided that. While my experience in therapy was positive and something I'm most proud of, I recognize it is only one of the many ways in which people experience healing after traumatic events. For anyone with a loved one who experienced sexual assault, tell them you believe them, and recognize the toll that it can take, both outside and within. I saw a therapist for the last 2 years of my undergraduate career. It was hard work, but she helped me put myself back together into this person that I actually recognized. With my new tools, I could finally build healthy relationships with others and return to my dreams of becoming a doctor. My trauma stripped me of my sense of me. Therapy brought me home to myself. Therapy saved me.
Well, I want to thank you again for having the courage and the desire to write that article. And you're going to help so many more people than you can really even imagine. And at least that was my experience when I disclosed my own story and my own struggle. And, you know, like I said before we started recording, is your post made me post on Instagram about what I was going through and how I had a lower back injury and how I needed to go back into therapy and seek out a psychiatrist, because for a long time I just kind of thought passing my classes, exercising just meant, oh, okay, I'm doing great with my bipolar disorder, but it didn't. So even someone like myself who hasn't experienced sexual assault, you helped me. So once again, thank you. It was an incredibly written article, and I hope everyone who reads that article reaches out to you or comments or shares it with friends of theirs, because you did a really, really amazing job, and I hope you continue to write. So why'd you write that article?
I had been thinking about writing about this for a while. I had kind of reached the point where, this happened a while ago, and I've changed so much since then, and honestly, I maybe can count on one or two hands how many people I've shared this with. And that's not because I'm not healed from it. I think it's just something that doesn't come up, or, it just was this long process between this happening and then kind of me figuring all this stuff out with my therapist. And the sexual assault was just one piece of that I figured out. I do share a lot, though, about how... and that's why I wanted to focus on the piece on the therapy, because that just was such a transformative thing for me. And we did have the assignment for school to talk about, I forget how it was worded, but something that you can advocate for or that you have personal experience in. And I felt like putting that light on it was an important way to, I guess, talk about the assault. I was just contacted this Monday, so less than a week ago, about posting it. And honestly, like when I reread what I wrote and kind of his small edits that the person who deals with posting the blog made, I was kind of embarrassed. Just like I'm a very careful writer. Like you can tell in my writing that I'm like have a scientist background. I'm not much of a creative writer, and
well, okay, I disagree with that. That's
well, thank
bullshit.
you.
You wrote that really, really well. You are a creative writer. Maybe you just don't realize it because we're in the midst of purely logical thinking, purely science. But you are a creative writer.
Thank you.
You are.
I'm not fishing for compliments, but thank you. I just want to say that part of me really, really wanted to just say, I'll publish this, but after I take a few weeks to intensively look at it. And then I was like, no, we have finals, and if he thinks it's good enough to post now, I'm just doing it. And that was a pretty big jump for me. Like it was pretty scary earlier this week, just kind of waiting for it to come up. I changed a few parts, just a few things I wanted to emphasize in it. For example, I talked about the shame that I felt, and I talked it over with a friend too, and she agreed with me that I just needed to add that while my feelings were valid and anyone else's feelings are valid after you experience trauma, sexual assault isn't something you should feel shame about. Like, it's not an inherently shameful thing. Like, we don't, I think we don't have as much, I don't know, but I imagine that other sort of people who are victims of other sort of crimes don't have the same amount of shame, and that's actually pretty messed up that shame is a feeling that seems pretty universal.
Yeah.
And I think the shame is also aids in the silence, which is this, vicious cycle of people not talking about it, and then it being this huge, systemic issue, not only in university settings, but everywhere. So anyways, what was I talking about?
What has been, when did it post? Yesterday?
It was Wednesday.
Thursday?
He posted it on Wednesday, and it didn't go up on social media until Thursday. Okay. So that time between Wednesday and Thursday, I was also really nervous because I didn't know if he was going to wait, like a week. Mm-hmm. And right before an exam, I was going to see it on social media. Yeah. I kind of wanted to deal with like what I assumed to be kind of like flood of a few people saying, "Oh, I read that. Oh my God," which I did get. It wasn't huge, but I did get that from a few people.
Well, that's what I want to hear about. What has been the reaction? I know it's only been up for a day or so, or a couple days now.
Yeah, just a couple days.
What has been the reaction?
I would call my closest friends at school have all said something. A couple random people. No one that I know in terms of like people outside of school. So my friends in Seattle or in Wisconsin or just throughout the country, none of them have reached out because, I don't think any of them know. Mm-hmm. Honestly, my biggest fear is kind of discussions with family about it. Just because when I did, we can talk about this at another time or now, I don't know. But when I did first tell my family about this, it didn't go over the greatest.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's all right. And I think that aided to maybe why I was very selective about sharing this story a while ago. Now I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like I'm in medical school. I feel so much stronger and like I've worked through a lot and I'm just like, whatever, I'll tell whoever I want about this. And,
well, I did Tara, and she had an experience similar to yours. Mm-hmm. And what I really think is it's going to make you a better doctor in the end. Mm-hmm. And whatever you end up going into whatever, I don't really even know what you're exactly interested in, but you're going to have patients that also go through similar experiences, and you're going to be able to connect with those patients so much more. And what I said to Tara is, I know as doctors, we're not going to get the time with patients that we want. And so that blog post and hopefully this podcast as well, you can direct your patients to and be like, I know what you're going through. I wish I had the time to really get into this with you, but how about you read this podcast and read this podcast, listen to this podcast and read this blog. Yeah. And let's talk about it in our follow-up visit. And it's just such a way that you can intimately interact with patients without being in front of them and being able to give them the time of day. And also my experience with sharing my stories and struggles is, and maybe you thought this too, why you only decided to disclose to a few people at first, is it's a hard story to tell. It's emotional, it's exhausting, it takes a while. And so I think, using written words or like I did with YouTube or whatever, it just can reach so many more people so much more efficiently. Yeah. So I'm really glad that you had the desire and the courage to post this. Because that assignment that you were talking about, I had to too, and we were in the midst of exams and it was very difficult, and I wanted to put my heart and soul in it, but I wanted to pass respiratory. So my articles were god awful, and I hope they never see the light of day because I'd be shocked if even I passed those damn assignments. Yeah. But I digress. Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of get into the grid. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add that I think the thing that, because I have been thinking about writing about it for a while, and that might be actually healing for me and also beneficial for others. So it's like, I feel like I've been good, like in a good place for the past several years. Mm-hmm. But I just want to add that in the fall, someone who's close to me asked me to help someone else that was close to both of us through a sexual assault. And it was when I was just starting medical school. Yeah. And the person who asked me had a really hard time asking me because she's like, I'm sorry, I don't want you to like have to.
I don't want to feel like a burden.
I don't want to feel like a burden, but also like I don't know. I know I'm not the one to talk to her about this. And so, anyways, I called her up. I talked with her about it, and we talked for hours. And I realized like I had a lot to say, and I also I think it was beneficial. And
I bet.
It felt almost empowering to realize like how. I think that was kind of the first time I realized how far I had come. Yeah. And that it was also the first time I realized that I could potentially help people in my long struggle and hopefully prevent people from going years without telling people like I did.
Yeah. Well, were you at my talk experiencing psychosis? I remember you wanted to go.
I had a different meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I remember. Well, we filmed it, and it is eventually going to see the light of day. Hopefully on the PNW website. If you're listening, put it on the website. But how I started that talk is I'm a big proponent of therapy. Like you, I've gotten so much out of therapy, and I've grown such a deeper appreciation for mindfulness and trying to live in the moment, but still, my favorite method of therapy is telling people my story because it's like an act of ownership and empowerment. And I don't feel like a victim of bipolar disorder. I feel like a survivor and a warrior and like someone who's trying to push the envelope and improve treatment and whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you've had similar experiences.
Definitely.
Too.
I mean, the word victim is something that I think a lot of people don't identify with and try not to use. Survivor is something that they like. And I think the one caveat to that is it's not for everyone, mm-hmm. And for example, that woman who came for APD, who she was sex trafficked for.
Yes.
And I mean, she didn't really start her healing until 5-10 years ago. And now she's probably in her 40s. Mm-hmm. And I asked, I think in front of the class, I asked, what was the first step for you? And I kid you not, what she shared, her first step was just speaking in front of a bunch of people. Yeah. She kind of got involved with some, an organization that was kind of helping her out, but she didn't mention anything about formal therapy, which she may have just not been disclosing. But, mm-hmm. I mean, she went from within, I think, of just a few months, not even realizing that she had been trafficked for years to speaking to crowds. Yeah. And she said that, after the first time she talked, she was not able to even function for a week, it's traumatic, but she views that as a good thing, and that was her form of therapy, which is just interesting because I feel like for me, I I don't know. It's different for everyone, but for me, it's like, I'm talking about it now because I've done all this other stuff, but I'm not sure if I would be able to talk about it now without that other stuff. But, I mean, everyone's different.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's kind of dive into the details now.
Yeah.
So before we kind of even get into this experience of Boston, you know, you grew up in Wisconsin, right? Small rural area. You said you had some experiences with depression and stuff. So what was that like?
So I grew up, not as Wisconsin as you may think it is. It's a beautiful college town.
You didn't have cheese for like every
Oh,
night?
I had cheese all the time. I love cheese curds.
Okay.
But my parents are physicians, and so I grew up like a privileged life. They're primary care physicians, by the way, which I think has a lot to do with why I want to go into primary care. Is I saw that model and that you know, you can change lives and, you know, live and have kids and whatever you want to do. But depression runs in my family, and when I started struggling early high school, I was unhappy a lot and had a lot of social struggles, and I don't know if my parents are ever going to listen to this, so I'm just going to say it. My mom, I think, very incorrectly put me on medication pretty quick. She was very quick to put me on medication.
And was she the one that prescribed that to you, or was it a different person?
She had me see the same psychiatrist who she was seeing, who was covered by insurance, who was a total asshole. God,
It's okay you saying that. Don't feel bad.
He didn't connect with me at all. I was so confused. I did feel a lot of shame about it. I don't know why shame keeps coming up in my life, but...
Well, shame and mental illness and mental health is very connected. You know, people... You know, I always like to use this analogy. From a 30,000 foot perspective, Hannah grew up with 2 physician parents. You know, she never probably had financial constraints, and you were able to do the things you want, whatever. So Hannah's supposed to be happy. You know, and so the fact that you weren't feeling great, I think it makes total sense that you were feeling shame.
And I think maybe, I'm just realizing this now, it was kind of, you know, and this is me through my teenage brain, and I want to give my parents grace for what they did, but it was almost like I was struggling, and the first thing that she said was, well, you have this diagnosis, you know? She put me on the same medication that she was on, which, like, if I...
Do you remember what it was?
Bupropion.
Okay.
Which I'm pretty sure increases suicide attempts for youth, when youth go on it. I don't want to just, like...
I don't know.
Okay. I just remember reading something once that was like, really? Like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of things that happened with, like, medications when I was younger was, like, my parents not understanding that, like, I was still a kid. And that's a hard thing about teenagers. And I'm very passionate about, like, youth and healthcare and stuff, and also, like, the politics behind that, because we expect these people to, like, act like adults, but also they're not adults. We don't give them, you know, the legal rights to do a lot of things. And then also there's a lot of stuff going on in their brains. And I think we're kind of quick to just be like, oh, you're fucked up. Not that depression is being fucked up. That's not what I'm trying to say. But regardless, I did not have a good relationship with that part of me. And the med, it seems like, obviously wasn't working. Well, let's see. I got better. So that was like my sophomore year of high school. Junior year into senior year was better. Part of the reason I wanted to graduate early was I wasn't happy there. A lot of reasons for it. I had a lot of dreams. I was smart, and I was in this more like blue collar town kind of thing. And I think there are a lot of assumptions that kind of that were made about me that were hurtful. And I mean, just, you know, the normal teenage stuff. I mean, it sucked.
Well, you know, you referred to that, basically suicidal ideations of that med. Is that something that you were experiencing as well?
Yeah. So, I will get into that. So I'm going to start off from high school when I decided to graduate early. And I got into Boston University, and I also got into University of Wisconsin-Madison. my grandparents had gone there, my parents went there, my sister was there. I was like, I'm going to move across the country. This is going to be awesome. And I was really happy like that. My first semester, my senior year, I had these dreams, and I felt like I was my head was in the right place. Mm-hmm. And I was still taking bupropion, and at that point it was just kind of like, I didn't even think about it. And then I went to school. I've never been like someone who got homesick or anything, so I was cool moving over there and not knowing anyone. Did you move to
Boston immediately after you graduated early?
Yeah. So I mean, the way they did it, I think I had to take like 2 English classes my first semester of high school, because you technically need like 4 full years. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that graduate early, the people who that was in quotes, are people who like need to help their family like work, or people who are just really struggling in the school setting, and but also like a GED is going to, or a high school diploma is going to really benefit them later in life. For me, it truly was like, I was so excited for college and learning and education. I loved learning. Yeah. It was escape, but also I just loved learning.
Yeah.
And so, I like, had a letter that said I was officially graduated. I don't know, early January 2010.
Okay.
And then a week later, I drove out to Boston and started there for spring semester, which normally starts, I don't know, 3rd week, usually in January.
Okay.
And I was there just for that semester. I really wanted to stay there. I liked it. Although looking back now, I'm so glad I'm not still there. Yeah. I don't know. East Coast people like just.
Whoa.
Okay, sorry.
Whoa. But it's okay. No,
it was a lot of just like harsh realizations, like,
oh, we're assholes. Oh yeah, I'll give you that.
Like, I remember the first time I realized that like money was this thing that people used to like get what they wanted. It was like, just like, oh my God. People made fun of me for my accent all the time, which is like, okay, in terms of discrimination, like, does not matter.
Well, I don't know what you found. One of the biggest differences I see sort of East Coast, West Coast, at least like young social life. Uh-huh. East Coast, there's so many small little schools, and there's so many fucking schools out there too. Like, the second question they ask you after your name, where do you go to school?
Yes.
What are you majoring in? What's your career? I didn't get that same experience on the West Coast. I got, what's your name? What do you like to do?
Yes.
Kind of thing. And I don't know if that's maybe because there's much less schools sort of on the West Coast, maybe just bigger universities. There's not as many of those small kind of liberal arts, private Ivy League stuff. Mm-hmm. Did you experience kind of that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's a very complicated answer. I think there's a lot of societal differences, cultural differences, that revolve more about who you know and identity, truly internalized identity that is more based off of name and home and your diploma and where you work, that has more weight, I guess, than it does maybe in other places. Mm-hmm. Which maybe for some people that's great. But it definitely was a culture shock. It's hard for me to compare East Coast and West Coast just because I didn't move out to the West Coast until 2014.
Okay.
After undergrad. And I've only lived in Washington State, so.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely very different places. And, but my point is that like, I wanted to stay out there. I wanted to like get involved in things and get to know the city and get to know people. And at the same time, I was becoming an adult, just figuring out how to grocery shop and do laundry and all those college things, Yeah. And I think this is a big thing through high school is I just did not have good tools to like make friends and keep friends. And, I think a lot of that is, gender differences. I think females do have a hard time with that.
Definitely, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that just definitely added to my struggles, I think, is not having that group of people and not really knowing how to make that. I did a lot of just like, even still, like my first assumption is just that I'm going to depend on myself to figure out this problem.
Yeah.
And if I can't figure it out, then, there's something seriously wrong with me, instead of seeking out help from, friends, family, professionals, whatever.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know how I came from a healthy family. Like, I feel like I should have more since then but that was definitely a big part of who I was at that point.
Yeah. Well, okay, now comparing, I guess, the end of high school, you were kind of dealing with depression. You were just so excited to get out there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you were first in Boston, were you feeling really happy and euphoric, or was it still sort of this state of depression?
No, I was happy. I was happy. I mean, I was, enjoying the freedoms of not living in my parents' house anymore.
Living in dormitories?
Living in dorms, okay. Going out to parties and making friends and stuff.
Rooting for the Celtics?
I did not really follow sports when I was out there. How dare you? Sorry. I know. Okay. I know. Okay. I'm the worst.
I digress. They're on right now, but this is
no,
this is more important, and I'd rather do this, and I can DVR it and watch the highlights. Okay. So don't feel bad, but we're not recording this. I am wearing my Celtics shirt. You heard it, okay? Okay, so you were enjoying Boston.
Yes.
But, we kind of all know where this is leading.
Yeah.
So...
I can just tell you the story. So I didn't go into the story in the blog because honestly, it doesn't matter. And, I think that there's a lot of there's too much discussion when someone says they're sexually assaulted, in my opinion, about, well, did you know them? Mm-hmm. Well, were you drinking?
Yeah.
What were you wearing?
That was one thing we talked about with Tara a lot. And, unfortunately, her experience was drinking was involved, Halloween was involved, so not the typical attire, that you would wear the rest of the year. And she felt a lot of shame with that. And almost like people tried to guilt trip her.
Oh my God, yes.
Or you sort of brought this on your, fuck you.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, go fuck
There's
yourself.
So much of that.
Yeah, so
it doesn't matter.
What happened?
It's in my mind, I have so many analogies for this, and I have so many just strong things to say, but it's I don't know. It's someone, I don't know, a pedestrian's walking down the road and maybe they've had a few drinks, but a car who's supposed to be, or a pedestrian's walking down the sidewalk, a car hops over the median, whatever, crashes into them and hurts them. The pedestrian was walking on the sidewalk. It doesn't matter if they've been drinking or if they've not. They're not in the wrong for that, and that shouldn't be part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And it's just it's mind-boggling that is so much of the conversation. And you can refute that with stories upon stories of women who were minding their own business wearing sweatpants and they were assaulted. You don't have to go very far. I could walk down the road here truly, and you could watch me from the bushes and you would see the way that a lot of men in this world view women and view public spheres as being these places that women are walking into for their pleasure. Yeah. Or, women are made to feel like we have to present ourselves a certain way, and we are entering a zone that is not ours. Mm-hmm. And so that discussion of what you're wearing is just, I just like to keep that out.
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
But, anyways, with that being said, I went out with some friends to, I think it's called Alston.
Yeah.
Neighborhood,
yeah.
So, I lived in the dorms that were really close. It was on the border.
And that's a lot where the BU frats are, right? I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and it was a little bit
big party area.
Yeah, it was across from Commonwealth.
Yep.
Yeah, so it wasn't in the frat area. It was more on the other side of Commonwealth.
Okay.
Wow, I can't believe I remember this. It's weird. I haven't thought about this place in a while. And I had made one pretty good friend at this point, and he was out of town. I think he was at BC for the night where his girlfriend lived. And so I was out with other friends from my dorm that I knew by name, but not really well.
Yeah.
And I remember there was at this party, it was a pretty small house party. And it was some upperclassmen that someone knew. Mm-hmm. It wasn't dark raging basement or whatever. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, there was some rep that showed up from Rockstar or something and was giving out drinks to people and stuff. And I don't know for sure, but the way I felt and the experiences that happened to me made me believe that there was something in my drink that shouldn't have been in my drink. Because the rest of the night it's weird. There's never been anything like it since.
Well, yeah.
There was, at some point, part of this is memory, part of this is hearing this from someone else. In front of, everyone, I was making out with a guy on the couch, which is, not something I do. Mm-hmm. And apparently at some point, I was just passed out in his lap. You know, like I obviously should have been home, and not there. And I was left with like tons of hickeys all over my neck from that, and also like obviously very embarrassed about that. But I truly like remember maybe a sliver of it.
Yeah.
And then there was this guy. His name's Ricardo. I'm still Facebook friends with him. I haven't talked with him about this since. It's kind of weird. He lived in my dorm floor, like in the room next to the room that was like my good friend there. And he was just part of the group that was out, and I don't think I ever had like a private conversation with him. I wasn't like interested in him or anything. I think he kind of offered to take me back to the dorm because I obviously wasn't doing well. We went out a door that I thought was going outside, and then I realized we were like in this like stairwell that I think led up to like a different apartment, or maybe to it wasn't the door that led to outside. I remember there was like, I think he led me up the stairs, and then there was another closed door at the top of the stairs, and in that like little space between the top of the stairs and that closed door, he started like making out with me and stuff, and I was like clearly not having it, and I like tried to I walked away from him. I fell down half a flight of stairs, really hard onto my knee, which the next day was like a huge bruise, and I have this little numb spot on my knee that is still there. And I somehow made it clear I wanted to go home. I put on my boots somehow, and we walked back, and this is in the winter, so I like had a coat and stuff and whatever. We walked back, and I remember like walking into the dorm and like being like, okay, Hannah, like don't look like you're really drunk, because they were super strict about like not having like alcohol on campus and stuff, just because it was a big city. They had their police department just for the university was huge, and the punishment for like drinking the dorms was like hundreds of dollars and stuff like that. It was crazy. So, but it forced people to go out in neighborhoods and whatever, and so I thought I was just going home. Next thing I remember, we were in his dorm room, which was just like kind of across the hallway and through a lobby from mine, and he was trying to have sex with me, and I was kind of partially passed out. I'm sure I wasn't moving. I remember saying no. I remember being frustrated and scared. I mean, I was on my period, so it's not like I knew that, and I guess I'm just saying that to say, like, you know, it's not like. Another thing that bothers me is when people think that sexual assault is just women who've had like experiences that they regret. You know, my point is like I did not have any intention or any desire, even walking home with him or any time before that or after that, to ever like see this guy in that way. But somehow I was, you know, immobile in this dark room, and I mean, they're just little bits and pieces of stuff that he tried, that I remember, that still have like come up as kind of triggers for me, just little things that he was doing. I mean, I guess fortunately I don't remember all of it. But I mean, it was scary, and I mean, I woke up and I was in like a pool of my own blood. I put on my pants and the button was like broken off. My boots were ripped, and I did, you know, the worst quote unquote walk of shame. Yeah. I hate that phrase. Back to my room where I vomited and tried to figure out what was going on. I don't know if it's TMI, but I'm going to share it anyway. A week later, I noticed like a weird smell, and I realized that I had a tampon shoved up inside me. My best friend, who was at BC that night, came back, and he came and talked to me and was like, Like, oh, so what happened with Ricardo? Like, I saw him washing his sheets. Sounds like you guys got down and dirty. And I heard that, like, all the people on the floor are saying they came home and they heard you saying, "Fuck me, daddy." And it's like, that was like a shock to me. And apparently Ricardo told him that we had anal sex, which I had never had. And I felt like I would have known if that would have happened. And "fuck me, daddy" aren't words that I would have ever said. Yet everyone on my floor and all my new friends thought that I was this, I don't know, there was this story suddenly that everyone knew that was very different than my experience. And I just didn't know how to deal with it, you know?
I mean, I can't even imagine, because you dealt with such a horrific experience in those moments in that dormitory room that, you know, you clearly didn't consent going into, and the acts that you clearly didn't consent to being involved in. But then there was also this other component that then you had to deal with, this social component and, like, essentially lies. Yeah. And I mean, I just hearing this is giving me sensations of nausea, because it's so, I can't imagine the pain that you must have been in. And like I said, in those moments of that, and like you think it's over, and it seemed like it just only got worse. And I'm really sorry you experienced that.
Thank you.
What happened next?
So I think my good friend at the time, I kind of tried to tell him that it wasn't consensual, and he just, like, didn't really believe me. We didn't talk about it since then, although years later he messaged me, referenced that situation, and said, "I'm sorry, like, you were raped, weren't you?" Like, he recognized what it was, you know. He had, and which meant a lot to me. You know, but I couldn't articulate at that time, you know, what had happened to me. Like I said in the piece, like, I didn't even realize that I was really sexually assaulted. I mean, it's horrible now, because I feel like everyone gets trained on it, and maybe I was trained on it, but I really did not understand. Like, I mean, getting raped was something that happened when you, like, walked, you know, you were in a dark alley and someone grabbed you, and, you know, it wasn't something that happened when you were drinking probably too much, and it was someone that you knew, and mixed in with this time when you were, like, you know, meeting new people, and it just, it's horrible to think about it now, but, like, for what, you know, just thinking, like, oh, I was a smart kid, but I didn't know, like, I really didn't know what had happened to me. Yeah. I just knew that it sucked, and I had a hard time sleeping after that for a while. And I kid you not, every night when I went to sleep, it replayed in my mind, and I tried to figure out what I did wrong and how I could have changed it. And I finished up that semester. At some point I realized that I couldn't go there again, and I had to, like, apply to University of Wisconsin again, because I didn't have sophomore status, because I hadn't taken enough classes, obviously, because I'd only been there for a semester. So I couldn't transfer. So I was considered, in the eyes of University of Wisconsin, a freshman starting over. And even though I had gotten in already for the spring, I wasn't in for the fall. So I had to, like, make a few calls, and I don't know, I think my dad helped me pull a few strings, honestly, to say, look, because I'd missed a deadline. Sorry, I didn't say that. Okay. I had missed a deadline for it was in March. Yeah. And I was applying for undergrad for freshman year, and anyways, I got into Wisconsin, and I didn't care. I was just sad at that point that I had to move, but also, like, Boston University was very expensive. And my parents could help me.
I think it's one of the most expensive.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's probably about the same as medical school is. It's ridiculous.
Well, and just, like, the cost of living in Boston, and you know, going out and doing things. Okay, so you're, you know, this fucking horrible experience happened. And, you eventually, like you said, you made a decision to leave Boston University, which sounds like the right one. Did you ever tell anyone else at Boston? Did you ever go to any counseling services? Did you go to the hospital and, rape kit? Did you file a police report? Any of that?
I mean, I was on birth control pills, and so like I had gone on those when I was 13 for my acne, so I didn't have to worry about the pregnancy thing. I think he used a condom. I can't remember. I think I did get tested at some point that semester. If I didn't, then I did it like a few months later. But no, like I said, I didn't think that I was assaulted. I thought that I had this like horrible night that I regretted, that I was ashamed about. The crime aspect of it wasn't in my radar and on my radar.
Let me push you on that, because from my perspective, you say you have these feelings of regret, but what could you regret? Because in my eyes, you got fucking roofied.
I think that the difference, I think that if you were a woman, you would know what I mean.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that to insult you. I'm saying I'm saying that to just put context in this, that the way we view kind of female sexuality is it's something that like we have this like double standard for, right? Like we don't want the prude, but if you sleep with too many people, then you're this
slut.
Then you're the slut, yeah. And more complicated that is like just like the ideas about about pleasure, and I was in a time in my life when I was like exploring like what casual sex meant to me, and if that was something I desired. And it wasn't really something I had like engaged in too much, but it was something that I had some experience with, and I think that was kind of tied into it, is like, well, is this just a casual sex encounter gone wrong? You know what I mean?
Or is this what casual sex is?
Yes, exactly.
Because you were
defining
probably,
that.
Just 18 at that time?
Yeah, I was 18, just figuring out what that meant, and also I think for women especially, sex isn't something that we talk about as being for female pleasure, unfortunately. And that was something that I still hadn't like really grasped, is that it should be for pleasure, and if it's not pleasurable, then something's wrong. Instead, I think women are taught that if it's not pleasurable, then you're doing it wrong, or that's okay because it's all about him. And also I think I had a lot of internalized sexism about women, and I mean, I just remember, so I'm digressing, but I think it's important. I don't remember who this is from. I don't want to take credit for it. It's from a book or a speaker or something, asking men, I'll ask you, when was it that you realized that you were a man?
I don't know. I mean, I guess that, like you're referring, I guess that transition from boy to man. I don't know if I can pinpoint it. And I still sort of feel like I even have boyish qualities.
Or maybe
I'm a 29-year-old man.
When was it that you realized that like you are a sexual being? How about that?
Figuring out what masturbation is, okay. I think, is kind of, that's really, I danced a solo dance kind of thing, and that's kind of when I guess I realized, sex is pleasurable instead of this thing that I didn't really understand prior to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I necessarily call that my transition to manhood.
I actually asked the question wrong. I think what I meant to say is just when you realize that you're a sexual being. And so that what you answered is common.
And that's when I realized this is something I want to actively pursue, and I kind of understood why I want to pursue it, because it feels good.
Yeah.
And it's natural, and so yeah, I guess that's one.
So for me, when I first realized I was a sexual being, and I think that a lot of women would agree with me and have similar scenarios, is when I was a prepubescent 12-year-old walking down the street with my dog, and some men yelled, some pretty nasty comments at me.
And you were 12.
Yes.
That's disgusting.
So my point is that a lot of young girls and young women grow up thinking that sex is something that happens, something that happens to them.
Yeah.
Or it's something that we're taught to not take ownership over because we are taught that, we're here for someone else's gain, or we're here for someone else's pleasure. And a lot of that is just built into our society and built into the way we talk about it. I mean, this is a very rudimentary way, but we talk a lot about just a guy, did you get some, or did you get to screw her? Kind of, it's very based around his experience and him getting something, right?
Well, and he's the one that finishes. Always. Typically.
Exactly.
And it's not the same experience for women.
No, it's not. And, even just the way we talk about sex acts, which I think when we talk about, I'm talking about heterosexual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we talk more about sex that's not just between men and women, then we realize sex is more than just a man coming. My point is that I was very much it's crazy. I identified as a feminist, and my mom was a feminist, and I felt like I grew up with such great female role models. Mm-hmm. Yet, I still was in this very, typical narrative of someone who just didn't feel in control of that, and who felt that sex was something that people wanted from me and something that I could deliver, and something that sometimes I may get pleasure from, but sometimes I may not. And sometimes might bring me a lot of shame, but that's kind of my fault for being a woman in this world. It's hard because, who I am today, I'm obviously a strong person, and I think I was strong for my age and for my circumstances back then.
Yeah, not a lot of people would have moved 12,000 miles when they were 18 years old.
1,200.
You went around the world a bunch of times, and then you landed in Boston. Okay, you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
And so that did take courageous, and then you were a strong woman. So now after that experience, did that strip you of your strong identity?
I think so. I think that in terms of just my general feeling of kind of going out and capturing the world, right? Which I think is something that we view as just this natural thing that a lot of men are really great at. It's like, oh yeah, you just went out and you got that job and you became an entrepreneur, blah blah blah. And it's like, nah, there's so much complexity to that, and what allows you to be that type of person in the world that allows us to behave in that way. And I did grow up in this bubble where my parents told me I could be anything I wanted. I could do anything I wanted. And I had all these dreams, and then I was, I don't think I was sheltered or anything, but then I kind of was struck with this reality of no, to be an outgoing woman in this world, people are gonna, take advantage of you or try to strike you down, and I just think that, a lot of the assumptions that people, the quote-unquote friends that I made out there about me because I was this, outgoing, ambitious person, they kind of tied that into just the sexual assault and just kind of viewed me as this, annoying slut or someone who just, was full of herself or something, instead of someone who... So I think it very much did strip me of... my identity of being this intelligent person who, had all these dreams and took control of my education. And after that, I just walked through the world differently. Yeah. Definitely.
Tara said something very similar. And that her experiences changed her life dramatically. Not necessarily purely for the worse, and not necessarily purely for the better. It was kind of a little bit of both. So you referenced in that article how you didn't really disclose and really understand that you had experienced sexual assault. I think it was, a whole year later?
Yeah.
So I imagine that period of time sucked balls.
Oh, it did, yeah. So I referenced this earlier, or I hinted at it. So I came back from Boston, and I was just, oh man, I was in a rough place. It was this weird summer of like, hey friends, I'm back. Like I just went off and like, I had
and everyone's like, why are you back?
Yeah, I had this party in January that was like, it was December, like a graduation party. It had a weird time to have a high school graduation party. And, I was this girl that went off with dreams, and here I am back. And like, and I hadn't stayed in touch with these friends, and then now it was just like, please hang out with me kind of thing. And they all had bonded over this past semester. And, I don't know, there was a guy who like I still kind of was trying to figure out, we had kind of like seen each other before I left for Boston, but didn't really stay in touch. And he did some cruel, manipulative stuff, that hurt me. My friends, like I had a friend take me to prom, and he, I didn't think about like how triggering this probably was for me. And it was. He took me to prom like he had the year before, and we'd been friends since we were in kindergarten. And I had just gotten back from Boston, actually. Oh my God.
So you got back to Boston, but you still went to your senior prom?
Yes,
okay.
I forgot about this, man. I flew back the day of prom.
Oh, wow.
I shipped my stuff back in like 7 big boxes, and flew back in time to get into prom. And it was like, hey friends, I'm back. And he just didn't have a date, and he was like, oh, do you want to go to prom together, like we did last year? I'm like, sure. Yeah. And then he kind of like, we left early, and it was like, he's like, hey, do you want to go? And I was like, sure. I thought he was like going to go to a friend's house or a party or something, and I had no clue what was going on, like what parties were going on or whatever. And when I say party, I just mean like what my friends did. It was just like hanging out in a friend's basement, just like close friends that I'd had since elementary school, and a few others scattered in there. And I had just gotten into town. I had no clue what was going on. And he took me, like, he drove me like across the river. I grew up on the Mississippi River, to this like lookout place. And he said something along the lines of just like, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. And he like leans over and tries to kiss me. And I kind of like, I was like, well, dude, no, sorry.
Yeah.
Like, we've been friends since I was in kindergarten.
This is weird.
It was fun going to prom with you, but like.
That's the extent. Okay.
And then he drove me home. And it was like 10:30 or something. It was a senior prom and whatever. I'd like been to college, but I also like wanted to hang out with like my friends who I hadn't seen in like 4 months. And I think I was texting with someone or something, and there was a party that was happening, and he had just shown up there apparently, and he like had told everyone what happened, and of course people were making fun of him. He was the type of guy who like did stupid stuff, but then like he would tell people and people would laugh at him, but that was kind of like how he got that was his role in the group, was the one that people
I feel like you're describing my high school experience. But
it was like, he went to the party and he dropped me off, like he was punishing me for this, it was just like, and I think I just showed up at the party.
Yeah.
I was that type of person who was just going to be
it.
like, fuck it, I'm showing up.
Yeah.
And then after that, I realized, I found out, I think that the guy who sent him to do that, to go to that lookout place, was a guy who I thought was like, I could like rekindle my relationship with. And so that hurt. And I don't know, it was just a bunch of other stupid friend stuff that happened, but it was
well, how did you handle, because I imagine nearly every friend that you saw, why are you back?
I don't remember, truly. I do not.
Because that must have been really hard.
I do not. So, soon thereafter, June 4th, I think. No, June 5th. Yeah. I think June 6th was the graduation ceremony, and I was going to walk. And they really wanted me to walk because I was in the top 5%. And so they had a very like I was in like the program and stuff, and they're like, oh, you should walk. And I hadn't like technically done any of that stuff yet, so I was like, sure, fine, I'll walk.
Yeah.
That was like the 6th. And then June 5th, someone was having a graduation party. And I had spent the last several weeks, because I got back in early May, so maybe the past month, just trying to like get my old job back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all my friends were in high school throughout the day, so I was just hanging out at home doing nothing. Like, I was really depressed. And I don't remember what happened, but it just was this trickle of things that kind of made me like very clear of my current situation. And I had a suicide attempt that I think was not out of like was. It had been kind of a long time coming. Like, it was something that I had thought about, I think, for the past several months. And it's a scary thing to talk about now. And if anyone's been through that, like, I'm so sorry. Like, it's crazy to have these feelings in your mind that, like, it's crazy. Like, the sky is blue, you know, like, your shirt is gray, you know, the world would be better if you weren't here. It just was, it's just like this ever-present, like, reality. Just that seeps into like your being.
And oddly enough, it's actually normal. I mean, it's so many people have those kind of feelings. In the deepest stage of my depression, I had those feelings, thinking about ways I could end my pain and make it look like an accident. And I had a lot of shame around those. And excuse me, but disclosing that experience has allowed me to meet so many other people that experience the same thing. And I just think when people have those sort of thoughts, they just feel so much shame that they keep it bottled up inside them. And that's probably the worst thing that you can do. So, you know, you tried, and then after you did try and thankfully didn't succeed, then did you finally seek counseling? Or
my mom asked one more time if I wanted to see someone. And I think I said no. And that was that.
Okay.
I had a really rough summer. Really rough. I just was like, I clearly was behaving in ways that I was just like, fuck everything, you know?
And your parents didn't know why you moved back, right?
I mean, they knew the money situation. I mean, that was why I moved back, was the money situation. You know, I didn't move back because of the assault. So, I mean, yeah, they knew that and whatever, and I think they just thought I was, like, bummed about that. And I don't know. I mean, I think that they saw me as, instead of being this, like, broken person, whatever, they saw me as just, like, this bitchy teenager, you know? I mean, at one point they told me they thought I was a bad person, pretty much. Not pretty much. I can't remember the words that they used, but it was not a good relationship by any means. And I didn't have, you know, any of my friends from before. So I kind of got into this different friend group, and I don't know, I was working a lot and just, you know, drinking, smoking, whatever. And I started up at University of Wisconsin.
That fall?
That fall, okay. Yeah.
And did you live close enough to University of Wisconsin-Madison that you commuted, or you moved there?
No, I was like, it's a few hundred miles. Yeah,
oh,
it's like Seattle to
okay.
All right. I went off all my like the medications I was on when I moved there. I'm not really sure why. I think I just was like sensing that I needed to change something, and you know, not a smart thing to do. But I was pretty depressed when I got there. I was doing the whole like, you know, dorm room thing, and I think I felt like I was like too good for that, you know, like I've already done the dorm thing. Like I don't want to do this. I just want to like, you know, but I think they required freshmen to like live in the dorms, whatever. I mean, it was good that I did so I could meet people. Yeah. Excuse me. But I just, I met some friends. I'm like very ashamed of just like kind of the person I was at that point. I just didn't have my shit together. I mean, I just had all sorts of, I still had like the PTSD type thoughts every night.
Flashbacks? Oh, yeah. Every night,
wow.
So your sleep quality must have been
sleep was horrible.
Yeah.
I did not have a good sleep schedule. I would, you know, drinking helped me go to sleep. You've shared about that helping you too. Or just kind of just staying up as late as I possibly could until I just finally passed out, you know. Which is obviously not good for taking, you know, being in, you know, intro chemistry or general chemistry and calculus and, you know, all these things that...
Well, and even more broad than that, you know, you were dealing with all those things and not sleeping, and so I imagine your mental health just continued to deteriorate and deteriorate, and You said you were kind of using exercise as like somewhat of a coping mechanism, but maybe to an unhealthy level?
I did in the summer before that. It got a little bit unhealthy in the summer before that. But at this point, no, I had stopped exercising now at this point. And I had gained a significant, like freshman 15 stuff. I had joined extracurriculars and like I joined a singing group, which helped me, I think, just give me some structure. And I just was not doing well in my class. I was fine, but, not as well as the people who wanted to go to med school, And I was very quick to just be like, whoa, med school's clearly not the thing for me, I'm not one of these like type A people. And I think I just I don't know. I was not like advocating for myself in any way. I think I just was letting life happen to me. And I think that was a really big switch that happened to me is instead of feeling in control of my life, I had this thing happen to me and I just deteriorated into this person that just felt like stuff was out of control, not that I shouldn't, I take full, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not trying to blame any of my actions on anyone else, but it's just, the drive in my identity was just totally just flip-flopped. And it was a scary time for sure.
Yeah. Well, okay, so and in the article you say you eventually kind of got to that point, maybe I think it was about a year later you said.
Yeah.
And I imagine that anniversary must have been extremely hard.
Yeah. So I told my sister in that spring semester, so this is now a little bit over a year since it had happened. Because I think it happened in February of 2010. I think part of the reason I did, she was working for PAVE. It's Promoting Awareness Victim Empowerment, I think. Okay. It was a student org.
At University of Wisconsin?
At University of Wisconsin. I think it's a national thing. I don't know if it still exists. But I tried to volunteer with them, but I realized that it was too close to home for me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So it just, I couldn't go. But that was kind of I think kind of sparked it in my mind of oh, that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
They would put on little talks for the fraternities and sororities and just, they did a really great job of educating, college students. And in turn educating me. And I think I shared with her the story and that was kind of the first time I could openly talk with her. I remember exactly where we were and the exact restaurant where we were. And it was a sunny day and I remember feeling this relief that that she knew and that she kind of validated that I was, assaulted and that was something that, there's a reason I've been struggling. But like I said in the piece, there were so many other things going on that wasn't just this thing that felt like this urgent thing that I needed to work through or, there were a lot of other things going on. And also I was still a kid on my parents' health insurance, but I lived several hours away. So anything that their health insurance covered was not in my town. And in order to go see a therapist, I would have to talk with them first and figure out the payment and, all those complexities and
just
stuff.
Barriers to access to healthcare and making it more complicated. So it sounded like your sister had a, really positive effect and at least she knew kind of what to do. So what did you guys do?
I don't really remember if she followed up with me about it at all. I started dating someone, he had kind of wanted to be a therapist. And I think it was around the anniversary time that I started dating him. And I think a few months later I may have shared with him about it. And I don't remember if he encouraged me or I truly don't remember how it went down, but somehow I scheduled an appointment and somehow I realized oh, this is not a life I want to be living, and I have a lot of stuff I need to work through. And
Mm-hmm.
I wish I remembered better kind of what that point was where I finally did it, but I don't.
Okay.
It's not like a beautiful story like that. I wish it was.
Whatever. So, okay, you said, in your article that, like, I don't know which therapist it was. Was it your first therapist you felt a strong connection to, or did it take some time? Okay, well, that's lucky.
It was. I really lucked out. She was awesome.
And was this someone who was a counselor at UW?
No, it was in town.
Oh, okay.
And so, it was a pretty long walk or bus ride away from where I was living. But I think I had maybe read on the website that she worked with people who experienced sexual assault, and that she had worked with college students. And I think that helped me, because I think a lot of like the stigma around just like going to a therapist, and just like movies and stuff, that was still in my brain of just like me feeling like I'm going to come in and talk about my stupid stuff that has it's nothing to do with like the people who are going, through a divorce or through their kid dying or something traumatic like that, So I think reading that profile online helped me realize that like this was something that like was okay to like go to someone about.
Therapy for.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a slow unraveling of everything. I mean, I don't even think that the assault was like the main thing I talked about at first. I like, my relationship with my family was kind of messed up, and
well, you certainly had a lot to talk about. You were dealing with depression prior to Boston, the horrific experience at Boston. But then, making it more complicated, you also talked about your suicide attempt. And so it's just all these confounders. And, I am so happy that you got into therapy. And because I really think that was hopefully, one of the pivotal changes in your life that led you to medical school.
Definitely.
So let's now kind of have that be like what word am I looking for here? A turning point in this podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
So when did you start to make improvements, and how? And like, what did you and your therapist, or any other ways that you started to kind of improve your life and get back that identity that you held on to so strongly?
So as she was listening to my story, the sexual assault was, I think, the first thing that she grabbed onto. It was like, oh, well, we need to deal with this.
Yeah.
So right away, she gave me that PTSD diagnosis that like scared the crap out of me. And it almost made me feel like, really? Like, I'm not like, I think of that as being someone who comes home from, war. Iraq war, or so, even though, anyone I'm sure who listens to this podcast knows that like that's,
well, it can happen in anything. Like I had elements of PTSD from car accidents.
Yeah.
And like whenever I drive by this one area, I would get flashes that it would happen, and it was terrifying. And like I'd have trouble driving by this one area of the street that I could have died.
Yeah.
But even then, while I was having those flashbacks, it wasn't until years later that I realized, I was like, oh wow, like that was probably a symptom of PTSD.
And so I think that really helped validate me, just getting that diagnosis. And she gave me, I think she really recognized my anxiety right away. She gave me tools to kind of just deal with some day-to-day things. She gave me some breathing exercises that I liked. Although I feel like that was more towards the end, honestly. Like the beginning was really just kind of sorting through stuff. So, I mean, the family stuff that really helped me. For example, like, I think she really helped me realize that, like, I have this, like, separate identity from my family. I know it seems weird now, but I think a lot of people go through that phase of, like, figuring out who they are outside their family. And I think I was struggling with me making choices that were different than what my family made. I made some like improvements in my life, and I felt like they were still doing these things that really bothered me. And she just helped me work through that. She helped me recognize like why the relationship between my mother and my sister was so much different than the relationship between me and my mother. My sister was the firstborn, and just one thing that she said just about like, well, yeah, your mom was like right out of medical school. I'm sure she was terrified. She had this new baby, and she had all this anxiety. It sounds, my mom did have like anxiety and depression, and like I'm sure your sister picked up on that. I'm sure that, that is still this thing between them of your sister kind of protecting your mom. And me realizing, like, oh my God, yes, like that is like their relationship. And no matter what, like that's never going to be my relationship with my mom. It's just going to be different. And I think my scientific brain really liked that, of just like understanding like these
logical reasons.
Yes, definitely. One of the biggest things I feel like I should just get into, because I have a lot to say about it. After a year of seeing her, she recognized some characteristics in me, some behaviors that she was maybe thinking were like ADD, ADHD. ADHD is now just the diagnosis everyone uses. And asked if she could, like refer me to the psychiatrist who also works in the same group that she did. And hearing that was like, I was like, what? Because in my mind it was like ADHD were all like the troublemaker boys from my elementary school. Like that was that.
Yeah. And you were a capable student. Yes, you said you finished very well in your class. I'm sure you did well in college.
She helped me recognize that, ADHD is actually something that is really underdiagnosed in girls and young women, especially in intelligent ones. She asked a lot about just my elementary school, kind of who I was. And, I was a kid raising my hand and jumping off my seat, but it was okay because I had the right answer.
Yeah.
There are tons of other behaviors and stuff. But I went to see the psychiatrist, and I don't know how, but she made that diagnosis, and that was just like crazy for me. And going on, I tried a few medications for that. But what I ended up on was a stimulant, and that took away my depression.
Huh. Okay.
And I recognized that potentially, it's all chemicals, right? They're all kind of the same chemicals. They just kind of do different stuff in different places, and in some people there's more of them at wrong times, and that's how I like to think about these different diagnoses that we have. Putting that sort of framework on it really, really helped me with everything in my life. It was crazy how just this tiny, tiny dose of this medication cleared up this fog that I was having, and that led to this depression, and led to just kind of a lot of like the hurdles that I was having in life. It was life-changing, really. And then obviously, like, educationally, it helped me a lot. Until then, I didn't really realize that, like, when a professor spoke, that you were supposed to understand what they were saying. For me, it just... follow what they were saying. Like, that was not something I was ever capable of doing, ever.
Yeah.
And that you should, it should not take you 30 minutes to read one page of a book. I was a smart kid, but... the reading was always the thing that I was lower on, score-wise. The issue, though, is I did also have anxiety, and going on a stimulant, you can imagine how that can
be provoking.
Of your anxiety. I tried an SSRI for a little bit at the same time, and I didn't really like that, and I went off of it. And around that time, I graduated from college and moved out to Seattle, had a more stable life, and I realized that there were behavioral things that I could do that really, really, really helped me.
Now, what are you talking about? Is this like CBT or kind of cognitive?
No, I just mean like, what's it called? Like rituals.
Okay, yeah.
And I realized I'd been doing rituals as a coping mechanism pretty much my entire life. For example, I have a bedtime routine, I have a wake-up routine, and I think a lot of people do have that. We're creatures of habit. But the reasoning of why I have it and what happens to me when I don't do it, I think it's clear to me that it is very much something that I have structured in to help me get by in this life. And my exercising, sleeping, eating right. I know everyone loves these things, and these things help a lot of people. For me, doing those things have been very much this, like, I just have to be very particular about it. And I became this very particular person, which has a lot of flaws to it, but it also has made me be able to, like, be in medical school. And
well, I like to say those three things are really the only things you can have absolute control over. And so when people come to me with mental health challenges or just whatever's going on, we're first-year medical students. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about yet. I could put on this facade like I do, but I don't. Yeah. And so I try to encourage people to go seek counseling, a psychiatrist or a family practitioner if need be. But I say focus on the basic things. The food, the diet, I'm an idiot. The food, the exercise, and the sleep. And those are three things that you can control. And, with me, of course, I have my own sleep schedule or sleep challenges. But, if I'm eating right, if I'm not eating right before I go to bed, and also if I'm exercising, those will have beneficial effects on my sleep. And I like to say is like those three things have more of an impact, I think, on improving your mental health than even therapy and even medication can do. And I think like the medication and the therapy can take out really the acuity of mental health, distress. But focusing on those basic things is really how you handle this. And I think so often when people go see a therapist, and specifically a psychiatrist, they think that that therapist is going to say something that's going to be pivotal and, I feel so happy again. Or the psychiatrist is going to, here's a pill, it's all over, you're going to feel amazing. And no, like that's not how it goes. It's a long-term process, but if you can, like you said, get in those rituals, you can have such vast improvements on your mental health. So let me ask you, being that you were dealing now with ADHD and, you started taking medication, did meditation play a role at all?
More recently, I have been really into yoga, and partially for the meditative aspects of it. I found been really, really helpful for me. It's hard though, because, I'm a multitasker and a lot going on, and I like, I don't know, it's still a struggle, but, I never, it's not just the yoga, it's the meditation. And, because of that, I have to I'm very particular about the type of yoga that I practice and where I practice it and how I practice it. And
so what type of yoga is that?
So I had a studio in Seattle that I loved, and I didn't find one here that I liked, but also I can't really afford a really nice studio. So I use an online app, and there's more, there's fast-paced flow, which I get the exercise component of it, but there's also more just meditation yoga. I like the things that incorporate both, because I find that the meditation's easier for me when it is after a more intense flow. Although sometimes I just seek out the meditation a bit and that's it.
So is this more intense than vinyasa?
So vinyasa, that's what I mean by flow. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But then do you also mess around with yin? Am I saying that right? Isn't it yin yoga?
Yeah, yin yoga is a thing. That's not normally one that I seek out, not because I don't like it, just because it's not a style that I don't know, have found works for me.
I find the yin is easier for me to meditate, but I don't enjoy it to the near capacity, because what you're saying, I don't sweat. And, vinyasa, kicks my ass. I'm, and trying to hold in my farts and, not, unleash all. Yeah, I know. I guess, I'm now a YouTube yogi because, I do have flatulence problems. But, so what's this app that you're referring to? Maybe some of our listeners could,
Yeah, it's called Yoga Glow.
Yoga Glow.
Yoga Glow.
Okay. We'll put a link to it in the show and stuff.
So Mary at our school referred me to it.
Okay.
Yeah. You pay for it.
Okay.
I think it's maybe $17 or $18 a month.
Okay.
And it took me a while to find teachers that I liked, but it is, oh my goodness, there are thousands of classes on there taught by different types of teachers, different styles. And then you can just search by, you can search by teacher, you can search by style, you can search by length, you can search by level. Okay. So if you're more beginner versus more advanced. Personally, I really like, I've noticed when the classes are taught to an actual class. So truly it's a video camera in the back of the class. Oh, okay. And you get to see the other people. Yeah. And I found that those are better than the ones of just the teacher teaching to the screen. Oh, okay. Because I think that the teacher, with this class in front of them, sometimes struggling. This is better from the flow type of stuff, I think. Okay. Because they realize, I need to add a variation onto this because everyone in the class is falling over. Or I need to just say the words. It's okay. Be graceful with yourself. Smile.
I think I would like those classes better because, as a male, most of the yoga teachers I've used are female.
Oh, there are tons of males on there.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay, because they can get in positions that I just cannot, and I would fall on my face. And I haven't really, used too many videos of classes, and so I want to try that. Yeah. Mostly I use Yoga with Adrienne, and she's really popular on YouTube. Okay. And I just like going with her because a lot of my distant family is from Minnesota, kind of, Midwestern like you, and she has an accent. So she's like, breathe in, breathe out.
Breathe out.
And so I'll be giggling while I'm doing it, but I digress. Okay, so how I think we should kind of work towards concluding this podcast is, let's imagine there's someone else in this room with us, or, maybe sitting outside listening to our conversation. Maybe that woman or even men, because I think a lot of times when we talk about sexual assault, we assume it's always a woman, and it's not. And so I still haven't, I only know a few, and one of my future guests is actually going to be a male who experienced sexual assault. But either way, let's imagine someone experienced sexual assault and they don't know what to do. Kind of similar like you, or maybe they didn't even realize it was sexual assault. What would you want to say to them? Or when you were going through that next day after, what could you have heard someone say to you that would have been beneficial?
I'm sorry that happened to you. I believe you. This is someone who comes in and she has a very clear understanding that it's sexual assault, which I think is more so the case than was when just because it's been in the news. And
the Me Too movement. Yeah,
it's great. Huge. Just for helping people realize this is illegal, or, this is something that is hard to deal with. But I think that I would be hesitant just to be to press a bunch of terminology and I don't think for me it was necessarily it would have been life-changing for someone to be you were raped, now go to the police office and report it, I don't think that's not what everyone wants and needs. That in some ways could have been more traumatic, the experience behind all of that. As much as in the news you hear about someone in college who's assaulted and you're that's so awesome that you reported, your classmate or whoever did it to you, and you want people to report these things, or you question them, well, why didn't you say anything? The Bill Cosby stuff, why didn't you say anything? It's so easy to say that. Yet here I am standing here, this is the first time I've really publicly talked about it in 8 years, and I'm a very feminist, outgoing, sex positive person who is an advocate for, victims of sexual assault and whatever. So I would try my best to be in tune with what it was that they needed at that very moment. And oftentimes that may just be just listening to their story without judgment. And even be very careful about what I asked. When I told my dad, he said, he was very focused on the details. And at one point he was so, this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been drinking. I think that was one of the most hurtful things that has ever been said to me. You know,
Tara said, a therapist said that to her.
Oh my God.
And it's like, yeah, like you think that person is going to be so well trained and capable of handling these kind of things, but it's so hurtful. Because then that almost puts the blame back on you.
Yeah. That just mindset is just horrible. Because it's like, okay, so we as women are supposed to just not engage, and we're just not supposed to drink, you know, and even this happens to people who don't drink. So,
yeah,
you know, it's like, you don't, when someone gets in a car accident, you don't say, so this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been driving, right?
Yeah.
Like subtle hint of like, yeah, you should probably just stop driving cars.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, it's a ridiculous claim.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And it's like, why should you be robbed? You know, we're sitting here enjoying some beer ourselves. Yeah. Well, why should you have to change all of your life practices because you were a victim of someone else's bullshit? Yep.
I think I would ask them, you know, just so you know what to address, you know, what is it that you're feeling? And I would validate those things. And, you know, it might be confusion. You know, people can be raped by someone that they love.
Yeah.
People can be raped by their husband or wife, you know? It's complicated. It's not, I'm not going to, you know, sit here and say that like it's just this easy thing that we can just, so long as we talk about it, it's easy, you know? But that's just that support and that presence and just saying, I believe you and I support you. You know, asking them what they need from you. But being very careful what their boundaries are. I think it can be damaging to push it too far. To without their permission go out and you know, call the police or seek out, you know, counseling or whatever for them when that's not what they need.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's no one right way to heal from it. And it can be very hard, I imagine, when you're seeing someone struggling to, you know, ask them if they want to talk to a therapist or if they need help seeking out a therapist and they say no, but you see them continue to struggle. Ask again.
Yeah.
Or just say, you know what?
Don't give up.
Don't give up. Ask them again, or just say, you know, what else is it that you need? Do you need me to come over every Friday and just like hang out with you and watch a movie, you know? Or do you need just not to talk about this? Is that what you need right now? You know, and there's no shame in being like, you know, I have to get through the end of this semester before I deal with stuff, you know? That's okay, you know? Like, I just think that we shouldn't ask, especially just of young women who are still figuring out so much in their life and who are in college or whatever, we shouldn't ask them to suddenly become these like huge advocates and suddenly like take on the university and the police department, whatever, you know? If they want to do that, great, then support them in that. But if they don't want to do that, then that's great too.
Well, that was actually kind of my next question. And like, I guess I don't really know. But we talked earlier before we even started recording about how important it is, or maybe at least better it is, to try to view yourself not so much as a victim, but as like a warrior and as like a survivor. Yeah. So how did you really embody that? And what do you think that change was? And you know, I know it's hard, but maybe in like 2 or 3 minutes or less, like what would you say to someone who, of course, is a victim, but like how do they get to that stage of being a survivor and a warrior?
It may hurt now. You may be feeling like you don't know who you are. You're maybe questioning, you know, yourself, your place in this world. You may be questioning, you know, whether or not you can even get through this, but you will. And you will look back one day and you will be proud of yourself for being alive today and being able to tell the story of something that you went through that has made you stronger.
Well, I want to thank you again for doing this. And you're helping me just become so much more knowledgeable and capable of speaking with people who have gone through horrific experiences like this. And, you're a strong woman. I really respect you. I didn't really know you very intimately prior to this talk, so I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences. Because as a male, like, I want to participate in the Me Too movement, but I haven't been sexually assaulted, so oftentimes I feel like I don't know how to help. And the only way I really know how to help is encouraging people like you to come forward and share their story.
Yes.
And, kind of going back to something you said earlier, and I'm really not trying to blow smoke up your ass here, and I'm not just saying this, like, you are a creative person. And the way you wrote that article was powerful. And, I don't know if you consider yourself a public speaker, but how you conversed today was so well controlled and meaningful. And so I hope you do feel like you can get in front of an audience the same way that person who was a victim of sexual trafficking did at our school. Because I know you could kill it. And I know you would do such a fantastic job. And my favorite version of therapy is getting on a stage and telling people my story. It's, I'm really enjoying this podcast thing, but I like being able to see the reaction of the audience and eliciting an emotional response from them. So I hope that this experience maybe gives you some sort of desire to do that, and other women and men to do a desire. I hope we can kind of have a Me Too kind of event through the psychiatry club at our school. I hope you're participating in that. Yeah, there's a few other girls in particular who have alluded that they may want to do that, but that we don't know how. So maybe think about it. Let me know, because I just want to help however I can. And oftentimes I don't know how, but kind of like help me help you.
Thank you for creating this platform. And like to what you said about not knowing how you can help, like, I mean, this is awesome. Just like asking me about it, instead of telling, I think that it's great to have a platform, yet sometimes where some men fall short is they then somehow, they try to tell the story themselves, or they try to like explain it themselves.
Mansplain.
They mansplain it. Yes, they mansplain it. I love that term. And I think a lot of educated men especially mansplain. And it takes, I think, a very special person to say, yeah, I know a lot about psychiatry, my own experience, but I know nothing about sexual assault, yet I'm going to have you here today and talk about it. And, I'm going to ask you these questions very honestly that I just don't understand. And that is super powerful. And I really appreciate that. And you're doing the right thing. And I encourage you just, to continue being involved, and not give into that fear of, just maybe this isn't my place. And I think so long as your place is to uplift other women, and to share those voices of other women and men. Yes, I should say that. Yes.
Men oftentimes get left out of this movement, and it is unfortunate because there was just an NBA player, Kevin Dooley. Did you see this?
Oh my God! Yeah. I
yeah,
read that.
and I think the experience, obviously it's so difficult for both.
Yes.
But I really hope that this Me Too movement isn't just a feminine thing.
I agree. Intersectionality is very important, and I would argue that it in some cases could be harder for men just because of just the stigma behind it, and there's a whole other topic we could go into about the way that men and women kind of are expected to behave in this world. But being a victim of something like sexual assault, and having an identity of a male in the way that kind of, at least in our country, we oftentimes view it, can be very challenging things to hold for a person, or for an outsider to understand and accept. So yes, thank you for correcting me, and I agree that it's men and women and everyone else out there who wants to be involved, continue talking about it, and hopefully it's not a norm, but just recognizing that it's not just a stranger in the street. Yeah, that's part of it, but this guy that did this to me, he's successful, and he's probably, people would describe him as being a great guy, It's this thing that happens a lot, and we need to talk about it more.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've said this to, I think, every podcast I've done. I've been so impressed with my guests. I hope you had fun today. I had an amazing time. I hope that you're open to coming back.
Definitely.
And doing it again, because I think, we kind of alluded to it today. It's like me and you both, we have made improvements in our mental health, but we don't have our mental health perfectly together. We don't have everything together. We're medical students who are passing our classes. I don't really know what you're doing this summer, but whatever. We still don't have it perfectly together. And I think that the more we just show our vulnerabilities and just our shortcomings, the better that we can, help burnout with our colleagues, just better connect with our patients. Yes. And so, once again, thank you. And I'm excited to have you back on.
Thank you, Logan.
All right. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
And that is a wrap on episode 9. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in today. Episode 10, we're getting back to the roots of the show. We're going to do it a little bit different by normal. I don't know why I keep saying we, because episode 10 is going to be just me. This episode 10 is going to be really about my personal struggles with bipolar disorder. I think a lot of the time I put out sort of a fake image because I'm so open about my bipolar disorder. I love advocating, giving public speeches, this podcast. People assume that I always have my bipolar disorder together perfectly, like I'm perfectly recovered, and that is simply not the case. So I'm going to get into that, talk about how I have to go back to therapy occasionally, talk about how I have to change my medications at times, and how it still is a struggle. But because I've lived with this for years, at least no longer I'm ashamed of using the system. So thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate it, and be sure to tune in next Wednesday for Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon.